Well, if my review yesterday, for the Nissan GTR in special movie edition livery was a surprise, then this one probably even more so will be, because it's a car that you can't technically buy yet. In fact, none of us even own the car in the game yet, although many, many thousands of us have driven it, thanks to, of course, the Gazoo Racing Cup, which is at the moment the only way that you can drive this car. Now, some would have said just wait and do the review later on. It's probably a valid point, and there are a couple of reasons why that would have been a good idea. For one thing, we don't have a price yet, and secondly, you can't tune the car yet, so there's certainly merit to that argument. The reason why I decided to do it now is twofold. One, for those who haven't yet bothered to log back into the game and do the update, and maybe if you're curious, is this worth logging back in to drive? Are you going to miss out on something otherwise that you'll have to wait until the end of September for, which is an unusually long time, I feel like, compared to a lot of other vehicles. And for those who maybe are just curious what it's like in general, I feel like more people are interested in it now than will be by the time September comes around. So with that in mind, what do we know about this Corolla, and of course, how does it drive? Well, we know some things. Balance of performance is applied on the event, but it doesn't actually change any of the specs. And one thing which I'm going to be very curious to see is when we are given the car, and certainly when it arrives in the dealership, what is going to happen to the point level? Because you'll often see month to month the points will change on certain cars, sometimes by a small amount, sometimes by a significant amount, sometimes by amounts which are so big that it's made tune setups that I did ages ago completely irrelevant, either because they're way too low or sometimes way too high now. So this one for now sits at 513.62 points. So remember that number and see what it's like when it actually drops in the game in September in particular, but even when it's given out as a gift. It has 299 horsepower, unaffected by balance of performance. It weighs 1,445 kilos. Of course, it's four-wheel drive, front engine, naturally, and it is the Morizo edition. So an extra layer of special over the already special GR Corolla in quote-unquote standard form. Now for me, I immediately prefer the Yaris, both conceptually and in practice, because the Yaris I think has one key advantage. The fact that it's even smaller. The Yaris being such a compact, almost little wide arch kitted cube of a car, it's just so much fun to use. To me, the Yaris feels like what you'd get if you combined a Renault Clio V6 and a Lancia Delta. It's a great combination to have, and the car is fantastic to drive, especially if you drop the 800 horsepower Supra engine into it and essentially make yourself a little GRC car. This one, well, of course it has potential, and doubtless in future you'll be able to swap some kind of engine into it, because it's a Toyota in Gran Turismo 7, so they always get preferential treatment. For now though, well, as I alluded to when I talked about 1.36 as a whole, my thoughts are actually mixed, and I've seen from comments that it seems that yours are too, because some people didn't find any issue in the way that I did with this car, during in particular the Gazoo Racing Time Trial event at Road Atlanta, which is of course where I'll be discussing it here and where I drove it. Other people did agree with what I found. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and I have seen this to some degree with other comments as well, is that it feels almost more like a front-wheel drive car than a four-wheel drive. It feels like the torque split very much favours the front end, and although sometimes that can be an advantage, with this car it tends to only really give me the disadvantages. So it's heavy when you enter a corner, it really tries to pull out toward the outer edge of the corner if you accelerate too early, but then the part which kind of surprised me more, and this is where it really feels like a front-wheel drive car with no weight over the back end, is when braking heavily and then turning into a corner as you go over a crest, or as you crest a hill. And that is that I find it has this weird veering feeling. If you brake, turn, and again over a crest in particular where there's that weight shift, it seems to want to kind of keep going in whichever direction you turned, to the point where it's almost like the car's on autopilot and doesn't want to straighten up again, which is, it's weird. It kind of makes the car a bit twitchy, sometimes surprisingly unstable. And again, it's weird because some people don't find that to be an issue at all, that they haven't experienced whatsoever. So it is a bit of a weird one, and it's got to be driving style that's making the difference. I am very curious to see what it's going to be like with tuning. Of course, like the Yaris, it has a ton of potential, but in particular, I'm really curious to see what that centre torque split, if we can upgrade it, fingers crossed, what that can actually do. Because that does have the potential to change a lot. With any four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive car, it's a great tune to do. It's a great single piece of the puzzle to change in the upgrade shop that has such a drastic effect on how you actually use the car. Even if you don't upgrade anything else, you can change the car's entire personality really by sending more or less torque to the back or the front. Now, of course, we don't know what the price on this one's going to be. We could actually play a fun little game with that, what you think it's going to be, and then we'll see when it actually arrives who was the closest to it. But I would say that if you haven't logged in, if you haven't updated the game, and if you're curious about if it's worth coming in to get the car early or just to drive it, I would say you could take it or leave it. It's nothing particularly special. It's a perfectly fine car. It doesn't really bring anything radically new or different or improved to the hot hatch table, and to me, the Yaris is a better all-round car, and one which you can already buy and do engine swaps to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. For now, we may revisit this when we do have additional stuff like tuning. If nothing else, I'm probably going to do some kind of build for it, so that may be the way that we revisit the car, but until then we'll have to wait and see. So ultimately, that's it for my thoughts on all of the cars now from 1.36. The standout was definitely the Maserati, and of course a couple of them are a bit more strange in terms of not necessarily being a new car or not being able to buy it. And I guess actually it's not the end, because we still haven't driven the ambulance yet. So I'd forgotten about that until right this second. We still need to talk about the ambulance, but since we can't even access that, of course stick around for my thoughts on that one, and I'm very curious to see what that thing can do. Stock and especially tuned, it's potentially going to be quite fun, if not goofy. So of course, as I said, stick around for that on the channel, and until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.